Hey everybody, Donkey Storm here, and today we're going to make a tier list for healers in patch 9.1.5 for Mythic Plus PUG groups. In this video we're going to set some criteria for what makes a good healing spec in Mythic Plus, go over my thoughts on every healing spec, and we'll compare the list to the Mythic Plus data collected on the Subcreation website to see how it matches up. If you like this video and you want to see more WoW Mythic Plus content, please subscribe to the channel. Helps me out a lot. Alright, let's get started. Alright, so we're going to use this fancy MS Paint app to create some criteria for what makes a good PUG healer. So please remember, this is a tier list for pickup groups found through Group Finder or maybe 5 guildies just all thrown together. This is not an MDI tier list. This is not a competitive healing tier list. So it's going to look a little bit different than what you might see in those more competitive environments. The things that I think makes for a good PUG healer, first and foremost, is just going to be healing output and ability to create some room for error. In PUGs, you deal with people making mistakes. You deal with people having miscommunications. People are going to take extra damage. We want a healer that can, to some extent, heal through a little bit of that stuff and give our group a chance. So that's going to be our first thing that we look at for a PUG healer. Secondly, utility. What tools does the spec have to deal with the weekly affixes and just the random stuff that gets thrown at you in any dungeon? And finally, damage and damage profile. So how much damage can you contribute to your group? And also, how intrusive is that damage to your healing rotation? Can you do both? Or do you have to completely stop healing to do your damage? So these are going to be what we look for in each spec to determine how strong they are in a PUG scenario. Alright, so let's start off with the pre-specs. I've spent a lot of time on both these specs in Shadowlands, so I feel pretty comfortable talking about them in a PUG scenario. The order I put them in might surprise you a little bit, but if you think about the criteria we set, maybe not so much. So we've got Holy and Disc, right? And while I would say that they're very close, I'm going to put Holy for the moment in the front of the B tier. I'm going to put Disc behind it. So let's talk about why that is. So again, if this were a competitive tier list, this would look much different. But Holy Priest actually is pretty good at healing output and the ability to maybe cover up mistakes or come back from mistakes that happen in a PUG group. For example, you've got Guardian Spirit, which is essentially a cheat death. You can throw on someone that's about to die if you're quick enough. You've got big heals that move those health bars up really quickly, and that's very beneficial in Mythic Plus. Now, the thing that keeps it in the B tier and doesn't allow it to get any higher is, although there's some utility in Mass Dispel and things like that, not an incredibly great utility, but damage is lacking. So Divine Star got buffed, and that was nice. However, it's that damage profile that's still going to hold Holy back, as it's been for most of the expansion, where now Holy can do a little bit more damage. However, it's intrusive to the healing, right? So you don't have a damage profile where you just, lay something down and it does the work for you. You need to actively DPS, which is something that's going to hold Holy back a little bit. And then on the flip side, we've got Disc. Disc, which can do more damage than Holy, obviously has basically the same utility, although you do throw a PI in there, which is pretty darn nice. But where Disc suffers is that healing output. When stuff hits the fan, if Disc isn't already prepared for it, it's very hard to come back. It's very hard to get those health bars to go back up once they've gone down as Disc, and it's also very mana intensive. So while I think Disc in some tier lists would probably be ahead of Holy, for this particular one, I'm going to put it slightly behind. Alright, so let's take a look at Druid next. I'm going to put Druid in the B tier as well. I think we'll put it right here in between the two priest specs. All of these I would say are extremely close. So Resto Druid historically has been super strong in Mythic Plus. However, that has not really been the case in Shadowlands, where it's been sort of a middling spec since the beginning. So why is that? It feels like Resto Druid healing output is maybe a little bit undertuned. Compared to how it's been at times in the past, like in BFA, where it was pretty common where druids would just throw all their hots out and then maybe go into cat form and DPS. It seems like that's a little bit more difficult to do now. They don't have that Covenant ability that some healing specs have that just help them blast, convoke. Not as strong for them as it is for other specs. And while they are definitely the kings of utility and always have been, I think it hurts them a little bit that Guardian Druid and Balanced Druid are so prevalent because they bring the same utility and maybe are a little bit stronger in their respective roles. So while Resto Druid brings great utility, I feel like the healing is lacking a little bit and the damage is definitely lacking as well. So for that reason, while they're definitely not bad, they're not going to be up there as high as some of our other healers. Alright, so let's do Mistweaver next. I'm going to go ahead and put Mistweaver right next to Druid because I feel like they're in a very similar boat. Although Mistweaver probably does win out in the pure healing output aspect. They can actually do a tremendous amount of healing. They lack damage. They lack the utility of a Druid anyway. And the utility of some other classes as well. And I have to admit that I have probably spent the least amount of time, well, I certainly have spent the least amount of time on my Mistweaver compared to any of the other healing specs, so this is more what I observe from the groups that I'm in. Seems like damage is lacking a little bit, utility lacking a little bit, healing output is very strong, but they're not as well rounded as they could be. So we'll get into some of the heavy hitters now. We're going to go to Holy Paladin next, and try as I might to I consider justifying this, but I'm not going to. We're putting Holy Paladin in the S tier, which is pretty well known by this point in Shadowlands that Holy Paladins are tremendous Mythic Plus healers. Their healing output is solid, their utility is solid, their damage is incredibly good. So let's talk about what's missing then, which in the S tier is not going to be much, but the one thing that made me possibly consider not putting Paladin in the S tier for a PUG tier list is just the nature of their damage. So Ashen Hallow is an incredibly good ability, the downside being that it's a rather long cooldown, and it's best used when it's played around, meaning that the group is pulling around Ashen Hallow. It's being used, on big packs or just to maximize its damage. And in a PUG, you're generally not going to see that. PUGs usually pull group by group. Maybe they combine some of the easier pulls, but for that reason, I don't think that Paladins often get the maximum value out of an Ashen Hallow like a coordinated group would get. So while Paladin really is the total package, for that reason, it is not going to be the top spot on my PUG healer tier list. That spot is going to go to Resto Shaman. So I definitely feel like Resto Shaman is the strongest PUG healer for the moment because they are really the total package. They've got very strong healing output. They've got very strong utility, and their damage and their damage profile really lends itself to Mythic Plus in a PUG group where you pull group by group or however you pull, because it's on a essentially 45-second cooldown where you throw that Vesper Totem out every single pull and the damage just kind of happens. You don't need to focus too much on it. That's the profile we want, and that's really the thing that creates this gap between these 4 specs down here and these 2 specs up here. These 2 specs are also just very strong all around, but their ability to contribute damage without detracting from healing is what creates this sort of this gap here where there is no A tier in my mind in Shadowlands. We've got Resto Shaman and Holy Paladin, and then everybody else. And now, to say B tier is not bad, none of these specs are like unviable or should be avoided or anything. But right now, because of that damage profile issue, you can't really compare these 4 specs down here with these. Now, in a way, Discipline Priest might actually be the closest, but because of Discipline struggles in other aspects of healing a pug group, I can't put them up there or really anywhere else. Healing pugs as Discipline Priest is pretty rough, so kudos to you if you do that. It takes a lot of skill. But this is going to be my final tier list, so the next thing I want to do is take a look at Subcreation and kind of see how these things match up. Alright, so here we have the data collected on the Subcreation website. If you've never been to that website before, it's a super cool website that basically collects data from the various leaderboards and puts them in handy little graphic organizers like this tier list, where you can check out the most commonly used talents and covenants and which classes get played and what don't. It's a really cool website. You can spend a lot of time on there. I definitely recommend checking it out if you never have. So what we're looking at here is the tier list of this particular week. So this has been the first week of 9.1.5, and how the healer breakdown has worked out this week. And I feel like this is a pretty good week to look at this, because Tyrannical, Raging, Volcanic is a pretty easy week, where I don't think any particular healer is going to pull ahead because of their toolkit. It's a week where pretty much anybody, I think, should be able to be successful. So this is what we get. This is showing keys from 16 to 29. Now that includes pugs, that includes highly organized groups. So that data will probably be skewed a little bit from pure pugging, right? Because all those very, very high-end competitive groups are being represented here. So it's no surprise then that Holy Paladin is going to be the top spot, as the majority of those groups are still running Holy Paladins, although we are seeing a rise in Resto Shaman with like Thanner and his group has been holding the top spot at Mythic Plus for several weeks now. I also think it's no surprise then that Discipline, while still in the B tier, is in the front spot, whereas in my tier list I have it in the back spot. There are, I'd say, behind this Holy Paladin and Resto Shami, Discipline sort of holds a kind of distant third in that competitive scene, so it doesn't surprise me to see this Discipline here. And then I think just, Mistweaver doesn't get played as much, so it's probably being underrepresented a bit, and being down here in the C tier. I do feel like it's right there with these three specs as well. So we're seeing a similar story here. So what does this mean? This means 9.1.5 didn't really change anything as far as healer balance goes, right? And I find it hard to believe. Now, maybe double legendaries might change things, but in my opinion, the thing that's probably going to keep this tier list this way up until the next expansion, honestly, is the idea of damage profiles and the fact that you have 2 specs that can do damage while they heal, and you have 4 specs that can't. And damage is important, especially the higher you go up in Mythic Plus. So I really hope that going into probably more like 10.0 than 9.2, this is on Blizzard's radar. I feel like it's kind of awkward that the quote-unquote best healer gets decided by how much damage they can do and how they do it, as most people who choose to be healers don't do it because they want to pump damage. So it puts, I think, healing players in kind of an awkward spot, and the sort of have and have-nots of, do you play a spec that has a damage profile that allows you to DPS as you heal, or do you not? Because right now that is the difference between being an S tier Mythic Plus healer or a lower tier Mythic Plus healer. So I'm interested to know your guys' thoughts on this. Do you agree with my list? Do you think it needs changes? Do you like healer balance in Shadowlands? What kind of changes would you like to see going forward? What do you hope might alleviate this problem or make things a little bit more even? Go ahead and leave me a comment. And again, if you guys enjoyed this video, we're I'm posting WoW Mythic Plus content every week, and I hope you subscribe and continue to check it out. And anyway, I will see you guys next time.